His Highness, the Emir of Lafia, will give us his goodwill message as the Royal Father of the Day. And I've also been told that he has asked the DG NIPRID to take over as chairman of this event in his absence.
Please, a round of applause for our keynote address speaker. Like I said, this is an abridged profile of Dr. Obi Adigwe. On the 10th of August 2018, Dr. Obi Adigwe was appointed the fourth substantive Director General of the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development, NIPRID. The current Director General, DG, has over 2 decades knowledge and experience in healthcare research, policy making, and management, both in Nigeria and internationally. Prior to his appointment as DG NIPRID, Dr. Adigwe was the Executive Secretary of the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Group, PMG-MAN, where he played a key role in the development and implementation of policy initiatives, which made a considerable impact on West Africa's pharmaceutical sector. Some of his achievements in PMG-MAN include the prioritization of the pharma industry in the 2016 fiscal policy and the organization of the landmark 2017 Pharma Expo. He was also a lead contributor to the medicine security concept, which aims at improving sustainable access to safe, high quality, and affordable healthcare through local production of medicines and commodities. He is happily married with children. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome the keynote address speaker to the 23rd Annual National Scientific Conference, Dr. Peter Obi Adigwe. You're welcome, sir.
The person who was exhorting NAHAP pharmacists to keep quiet and settle down was wasting her time. This is one of the most serious cohorts of pharmacists that we have. So naturally, during the keynote, they will pay attention. Right. The Excellencies present, the Executive Governor, ably represented by our own Commissioner, Pharmacists, Honorable Ahmed Baba Yahya, Royal Fathers and their representatives, other dignitaries from government, and our own leaders in the sector. Professor Odianose Usifo, chairman of the society, Honorable Alhaji Pharmacist Baba Shehu, my brother, my neighbor, and my tenant, the registrar of the PCN, the very eloquent and erudite team of this AHAPN hasn't gotten into my mouth yet, so forgive me if I keep using NAHAP. I will be forgiven because I'm the keynote address speaker. The executive of NAHAP and the local organizing committee, all senior pharmacists in the house, fellows and colleagues. It gives me great pleasure to be with you today to talk about COVID-19 experiences, expanding the role of health system pharmacists. And I have put up my degrees on the slide, not because I'm not a modest person, but because I want to make a point. I have 3 paper degrees, my Bachelor of Pharmacy from Jos, my master's from the University of Edinburgh, and my PhD from the University of Leeds. And among the three of them, I say this publicly, and I'm sure I'm saying it on camera. Among these three degrees, the one that was most difficult and most rigorous was the Bachelor of Pharmacy from University of Jos. And you don't have to take my word for it. The Honorable Commissioner was in my class. Dr. Baba, where are you? He was my classmate. Afunu Dameida, Madam Afunu, where are you? Yes. These and other people around. I think Gabriel was at University of Jos too, and Okbaleke was in Jos as well. They can attest to the fact that pharmacy in Jos was sufficiently rigorous and sufficiently robust to deliver the kind of quality we have today. And it shouldn't surprise you that the royal father singled out the Honorable Commissioner, who is a Jos product, a pharmacy product, as the best performing member of the executive in Nasarawa State. However, despite the fact that my B.Pharm was my most rigorous degree, there were certain things I gained from studying in Scotland and in England. And I think one of the most important lessons I learned is of value to us today. It is actually at the very heart of this presentation. I started the master's in, I think, 2006 or 7, and very shortly after did my PhD at Leeds. And my topic was focused on looking at prescribing rights for pharmacists and nurses in the UK. And as part of my research, I found out that there was a time in the UK that the pharmacy profession was at risk of going extinct. And that just like in Nigeria here, where we have diverse focus groups, you have the hospital and academic pharmacies, you have those in community, you have those in academia, and those in I'm missing out one, industry. They have the same kind of theoretic separations in the UK. And it emerged that those in community their practice was being eroded by automation. You know, people pre-packing things and you just come in and pick up your products and you leave. In industrial pharmacists, you had people in other professions who come in and do detailing, and you have chemists and physicists and mathematicians working in the industry. So the profession couldn't stand its ground. But one area where pharmacy stood its ground, and which the pharmacists in the UK dug deep and seized on to be able to begin the reformation and the revolution that led to what pharmacy is today, was among hospital pharmacists. And it was when they began to make these arguments that the expertise of the pharmacists actually began to emerge. And the pharmacists were the first group of healthcare practitioners outside doctors who were granted independent and supplementary prescribing rights. After pharmacists, it got expanded. Now you have nurses, podiatrists, and physiotherapists. And just like in Nigeria and in other settings, the doctors and other groups who had exclusive rights fought it. But part of the work we did in the UK then, which helped underpin policymaking, was that prescribing by pharmacists was actually more cost efficient, more effective, and more careful than that of their contemporaries. And this was the crux of the matter in non-medical prescribing in the UK. And I can see Professor Osifo nodding, because when he was editor-in-chief about 15 years ago, his journal, the Nigerian Journal of Pharmacy, published the work that we did from the UK when it was relevant that Nigerian pharmacists also look at adopting that model. But the key message for the audience here today is that hospital and academic pharmacy could be argued to actually be the heart and soul of the pharmacy practice. And so we need to first understand who we are and what our capacities are before we even begin to talk about reforming those capacities. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to begin my keynote address. My presentation is going to be aggregated in three major areas. I'm going to talk about health systems and the pharmacist's role in health systems. I'll breeze through this area because it's an area most of you are already familiar with. Then I'll talk about the NIPRID experience. How have we, in the past 3.5 years, leveraged on our competencies, our capacities to begin to give NIPRID the new status and the new importance that it is known for nationally and internationally. And then the last part of my presentation will be drawing a corollary from the NIPRID experience to what the august body represented here can begin to do to enable the people seated in this room play a stronger role in health systems reforms. And so these are some of the concepts and theories I'll be talking about. Everyone knows COVID-19. I won't talk much about it. Pharmaceutical structures and systems for improved service delivery. This is directly linked to health systems. Again, this is an area where I won't really dwell on. Where I will dwell on a bit is medicine security and access to healthcare. Two of the previous speakers have touched upon this. I think it was the managing director, pharmacist Chuhemba, who spoke very eloquently about how local manufacturing can expedite access to healthcare as well as socioeconomic development. We were the primary architects of that particular concept, and I will bring it to bear in this discussion. And then obviously research, development, and innovation, which is the value that we bring to the room today. And so COVID-19, many people say it took us unawares. Well, not all of us, because if you look at our writing, some of us for close to a decade had been predicting this scenario, that if we do not look at building our capacity to make use of our resources, we will get to a stage where we would struggle because it is no longer feasible to abdicate the responsibility for providing for your people. And what COVID-19 did, apart from proving us right, was that it also laid bare a lot of other weaknesses within the system. We found out that our health institutions had been underfunded and in terms of priority, had gone very low. We found out that resource-wise, we were not making the best use of what we had. I was on, I think it was Silverbird Television, and I think you can go to our YouTube page, which is Dr. Obi Adigwe, and verify this. I was on Silverbird when I castigated officials of government at the risk of my job as Director General for not utilizing the thousands of pharmacies and pharmacists that we had in terms of vaccinating our population. Shortly afterwards, stakeholders began to talk more about it. That is a clear case of having resources, and because of a lack of foresight or because of unnecessary healthcare politics, you have resources, you have well-trained personnel, but for certain reasons, you're not using them. COVID-19 has now begun to show people in the healthcare sector, as well as in policy, that it is no longer sustainable. Task shifting is something that also became very clear that needed to be done in COVID-19, and inadequate public health emergency preparedness. Before COVID, we only had 2 labs that had the capacity to do PCR tests in Nigeria. It was very clear that this was not sufficient for a nation of our size. Before COVID, we had hundreds of healthcare hospitals and hundreds of pharmaceutical companies that had the capacity to produce sanitizers, yet we were importing sanitizers from China. These are some of the things that COVID-19 exposed, and I think we need to be grateful for this exposure so that we can begin to reform our system. And then the one that's very clear, a lack of prioritization of R&D. Earlier last year, while speaking at one of the side events at the UN, it became very clear to people in Nigeria and in Africa that we need to do better in terms of research and development. In my presentation, I provided evidence that our colleagues in the global north spend somewhere close to 4% of their GDP on R&D. We here in Nigeria spend somewhere between 0.1 to 0.04%. So in terms of relativity, we are 50 to 100 times behind our colleagues in the global north. Not to talk of in terms of absolute terms, where their GDPs are several $100 million above ours. Again, we are thankful that this current administration and several partners have begun to pay more attention to R&D, because frankly, without R&D in any setting, in any country, in any professional dispensation, you cannot have sustainable growth and development. And so who is the health system pharmacist? It's the pharmacist that plays a key role in various components of the health system. And I'm sure most of you know about that very common figure that's on there. They play a key role in various diverse but interrelated aspects of the health system, with a view to bridging interdisciplinary work and providing better access to care for the patient. And based on the training, These are some of the areas where the health system pharmacist plays a role in. But in the Nigerian setting, there is much more that can be done. Some of the colleagues who spoke earlier on talked about the consultant pharmacist recognition. It's very appalling that only 3 or 4 out of the plethora of healthcare institutions have begun a real-time professional and fiscal implementation of that very laudable intervention. Other areas where we need to begin to also pay attention to is the provision of clinical pharmacist interventions and a move towards pharmacists prescribing. Because even though this is an intervention that has been on for decades in the UK, in America, it is a move that we need to also put in our horizon here in Nigeria. And the various areas where it is clear that there are standards that we need to meet in order to play a better role in health system pharmacist practice are listed there. We need to improve on our research and innovation. We need to pay more attention to public health interventions. How many of us undertake activities that can be classed as public health interventions, advocacy, health promotion, and other key aspects of health, public health interventions? Clinical pharmacy I've talked about. Pharmaceutical care is one that I'm very glad has taken on very, very nicely in the Nigerian setting. But more needs to be done, even in the pharmaceutical care. What kind of comparative analysis do we have? What kind of publications are out there to demonstrate that we have a contextual reformation of pharmaceutical care to suit the Nigerian populace? And we've identified various specific fundamental functions that can also add value in this area. And they're listed over there. I'll pick out 1 or 2 for specific mention. One of the gentlemen I met when we were talking outside was talking about quality assurance. It was very heartwarming when the compounding units of the various teaching hospitals, various tertiary hospitals, various state hospitals and general hospitals began to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic by providing a key utility and a key product like hand sanitizer. But how were they assessing these hand sanitizers in terms of quality? We went for a UNIDO function a few days ago, and one of the presentations made by the WHO referenced the work we did at NIPRID, where we took a sample of hand sanitizers in Abuja, and we found out that somewhere about 50% of the hand sanitizers that were available were actually substandard. And if we must tell ourselves the truth, in the early part of the pandemic, we had some hand sanitizers that you would use and your hands will not dry for about 5-10 minutes. It obviously doesn't have 70% alcohol. There were some that felt more like Akamu than like alcohol-based hand sanitizer. And after you used the hand sanitizer, you also had to go and wash your hands to get rid of it. These are some of the things that, if we also looked at improving the quality assurance, embedding quality assurance in our compounding and our manufacturing, even if it is small scale activities, it will bring value to our health systems pharmaceutical practice. And then even in the administration of medication and provision of information and advice to patients, how have we reformed these areas? These are ongoing activities. I know very well our our pharmaceutical departments in most hospitals are very, very up to task with this. But have we also tried to document these episodes? If we've documented these episodes, have we undertaken a trend analysis? Have we done a comparative analysis looking at tertiary organizations versus state organizations, looking at incidents found out by intern pharmacists versus those found out by consultant pharmacists? These are certain areas where we can add value to the already ongoing interventions that we're making in our health systems pharmacy. And then I've put in the next couple of slides because I'm sure these slides will be shared with all the delegates. So I've put in, there's several slides where I've listed certain specific activities for people to take away and read, and I won't bother to go through those slides. But this is one of them, various activities that is expected of pharmacists in health systems. If we're not doing them already, these are things we need to look at, including in our reforms in our health system practice within our hospitals. And then this, again, is another figure diagram that is very well known in the sector, so I won't belabor on that. The good hospital pharmacy practice, again, this is a creed which I'm very sure many of you are aware of. It was put together in FIP about 3 decades ago, and it basically lists what is expected of the hospital pharmacist in their practice that would enable them identify based on reflection or based on an audit if they're undertaking GHPP, and it's listed there. So I won't go through that. This again is a corollary of that, how we undertake our activities, the various diverse but interrelated areas that make up the effectiveness of our practice in order to impact on the patient. Our clinical practice, the education aspect of our work, the information management system, and the patient engagement. How well do we take this in our itinerary to make sure that it contributes to how we reflect on our practice? And then that ended the first phase of my presentation, which is basically refreshing your memory about what you already do and the areas where you already have expectations. Now, the next aspect of my presentation basically tells you about how NIPRID reacted to COVID-19 and some of the strategies we adopted in NIPRID, which based on peer-to-peer sharing can be of value to this august body when you're looking at reforming your processes, both as an organization and for your own personal practice. And so most, if not all of you, know who NIPRID is. It was established about 3.5 decades ago. And it was established basically to enable us harness what we have as a people. The thousands of plants which we know have ethno-botanical potential. The starch, the cellulose sources that we have that is lying there while we're still importing pharmaceutical grade starch. Also, the thousands of intellectually capacitated professionals that we have. These are also natural resources. So the thinking of our forebears was that we need to have an institute which draws the line on the human resources and the natural God-given resources and puts together a framework that will enable us bring out products and processes that will enable our people have better access to healthcare, whilst also stimulating socio-economic development, particularly in areas like job creation, capacity building, knowledge transfer, and revenue generation. So in most of our interventions, if you want to judge us on the ability to have brought out products and processes and our ability to engage with our human resources. And in most of the presentations that you will see where I have looked at the various strategies we used to re-engineer NIPRID's capacity, these are some of the output that you will be seeing on the slides. And so NIPRID obviously has, over the years, gained the ISO 9001 and the ISO 17025. I tell my junior sister, the Director General of NAFDAC, that we were the first to get it in this part of the world, even before NAFDAC got it. Is there any representative of NAFDAC in the room? Okay, there isn't. Well, NIPRID, in terms of ISO certification, was the first in the region. And following our attainment of the ISO 17025 and ISO 9001, I'm very glad that our younger siblings, NAFDAC and PCN, have now followed NIPRID in attaining these world-class certifications. What these certifications mean is that the output from these three premier pharmacy government bodies are recognized across the world. That's the meaning of the ISO 9001 and the ISO 17025. Additionally, we've been named Center of Excellence by various world-class bodies. And the slide here has some of the specifics of some of our world-class pilot and production facilities. But it's key to note here that in the past 3.5 years, we've had a 5-fold increase in our NAFDAC listed products. So we now have about 5 products that are listed by NAFDAC for use in the market. We have about we have about 20 to 25 more under development, and which in the next few years would also gain NAFDAC certification and get in the market. Furthermore, we have a commensurate number of patents. In the past 3.5 years, I think we've ramped up our patents from about 4 to about 14 now. And as everyone knows, the patent is your intellectual property for the intervention that you have brought to the fore. We've also developed quite a number of processes. Those of you who followed the presidential task force will remember that when the COVID COVID organics product was coming in from Madagascar, the president said that if NIPRID doesn't do the analysis, we will not distribute that particular product to Nigerians. It is of credit to the very, very highly regarded scientists at NIPRID that we actually carried out the first categorical analysis in the world, not first in Nigeria, not first in Africa, the first in the world analysis, of which our report went viral. And those of you that are very internet savvy can go online to validate this. It went viral in both English and in French. And so that speaks to the processes, because I've been talking about products and patents. It's also important to ask about processes. These are some of the products. I've already mentioned these. But more importantly, especially for this August body. There are three key strategies that we adopted when COVID-19 began, because most of you who know NIPRID and have been in NIPRID for quite a while would know that for years, NIPRID, unfortunately, was neglected. When I took over as Director General, I had an equipment deficit of about 20 years. About a quarter or more of my facilities were dilapidated. We had about 12, 13 dilapidated buildings. There were buildings where we had rodents. There were buildings where we had rodents and reptiles threatening scientists in NIPRID. And we first sat down and said, how do we find a strategy that will enable us get people listening? Because we had world-class scientists. We knew that if we got the right equipment and we got the right funding, we will do wonders. And we began to prove it when we started getting the support. But it was key for us to say, how do we begin to get people listening? So we did three things. First is we took a strategy of getting our competence articulated. After we got our competence articulated, we did what next? We began high level and frankly, very aggressive advocacy. And then after we did the advocacy, the results began to come in. But long before we even had our competencies articulated, there was a very important step that we took. We always spoke truth to power. And because for years we had done that, when the right opportunities met with the challenges, our foresightedness began to come forth. And so the next few slides is me taking you through how we deployed these three things: competencies, advocacy, and foresightedness. And so this is one of the areas where we began to showcase our competencies based on our articulation of our expertise and aligning those expertise with needs across West Africa. We had colleagues from across West Africa coming to NIPRID to take locally developed contextual training programs. The colleagues on the screen there are from Burkina Faso. And I think just a few weeks ago, we went to South Africa, signed an MOU, and based on those competencies, they're going to send a team of healthcare professionals to come and train at NIPRID. Again, this is another area where we leveraged on our competencies. We knew we had the competency to develop the eucalyptus oil from local resources. Anybody around Nasarawa State, Plateau State, Kaduna State knows that we have thousands and thousands of eucalyptus. Yet every year we import millions of bottles of Albas and Silverbird, enriching people in Asia and in Europe. What did we do? We used our competencies, did a pilot study for Kaduna State, and based on that, we've begun to talk about doing a feasibility study and a B2B partnership with Kaduna State. This is articulating our competencies and leveraging on it to bring out innovations. There are many more examples, but in the interest of time, I will keep the competencies short. If you want to know a lot more, in the earlier slide, that's the Twitter handle. And if you go to YouTube on Dr. Obi Adigwe. Most of our engagements are also there. So in the interest of time, let me stop there in terms of competencies. Now, coming to advocacy. Before I was appointed Director General of NIPRID, my father wasn't a very well-known politician. Forget that people are calling me Peter Obi Adigwe. I'm not related to Peter Obi. And my father wasn't a well-known politician, neither was he a well-known billionaire. But we realized that regardless of your competencies, if you're not able to articulate them and engage with the key policymakers, key stakeholders at the highest level, my friend, your competency will remain in your pocket. So what did we do? We articulated our competencies and began to engage at the highest levels. On the screen there is me with the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. He headlined our conference, ASIC 19, last year in person. He insisted on coming in person. And on the other picture there is me with Her Excellency Aisha Buhari. That product we're holding there is a product which she initiated following our articulation and exposition of our competencies. And we've begun to develop that product, which is a product that we went and harvested from Adamawa State because we knew it was important to her. And we've begun to work on that product. This is how we articulated our competencies, packaged them in a manner that is attractive to policymakers. And the advocacy has now meant that someone like Professor Yemi Osinbajo has agreed to headline a funding proposal for 3 of our products at NIPRID. These are other slides with the Honorable Minister of Health, Permanent Secretary, Chairman of the Senate Committee on Health, and other colleagues. Bottom right is colleagues from the industry. And just something that I think it was Sun Tzu who said, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. If you're looking for something, nobody is your enemy. Even if they insult you from morning to night, still articulate your competencies and go to them and say, Oga, you're the one that hurt me, but I'm saying sorry, no vex. See my competencies, let me use it and work for you. If you go to Ministry of Health, and colleagues here can attest, even as a sitting Director General, I carry files. I go to offices in some places, the people in the, what do you call it, that the registry will cost you. Then somebody will pass, say, do you know that's a DG? I'll say, leave all that one. Just make sure that you give me acknowledgement copy so that my file can go. That is how we got our things going in terms of advocacy. The bottom left there is just as a validation of what I said earlier on. For more tips on how we undertook our advocacy, you can go to the Twitter page or to the YouTube page to get more tips on how to improve your professional advocacy strategy. And so foresight, this is my favorite part. For years, we preached that local manufacturing was the way forward. There was a meeting I went for in the Ministry of Health where you had about 40 people from development partners, all of them except one person, Nigerian. And speaker, I was the executive secretary of PMG Man then. All of them, after we pitched, the same pitch that Managing Director Tuhemba made earlier on before I began the keynote, was what we made at that presentation. Let PMG Man work with you so that we can produce and you can supply to your teaching hospitals. And after we made that presentation, speaker after speaker after speaker, Nigerians talked about why Ministry of Health should not prioritize made in Nigerian medicines. It was the worst day of my professional life. It was only one gentleman, I can never forget him, Bilali Kamara, the country director then of UNAIDS, who said that what these other people are saying is not true, that he's diabetic and he's hypertensive and he's been in Nigeria for over a decade. And that when he goes to pharmacy shops, he always insists that they give him made in Nigeria anti-diabetics and anti-hypertensives. And that, as we can see there today, he's well. How many of us here do that? How many of us in our practice prioritize made in Nigeria? But we'll still be the first to complain that the government is not doing enough. In that room, every single Nigerian who worked with development partners spoke against local manufacturing, except for that gentleman, the Francophone partner who was there. And it speaks volumes for medicine security, because today, local manufacturing has become very fashionable. So you have what I call later day apostles, because there's money in vaccines manufacturing. Everybody has become an expert. But I have evidence. In 2018, 2017, 2016, senior people in pharmacy, senior people in healthcare spoke against local vaccines manufacturing. But we stood our ground, at risk to our life, at risk to our profession. When COVID came, what did people say? They said, Dr. Adigwe, you were what? Foresighted. We always need to speak truth to power, because a lot of these things are things that are known to us. But unless we articulate our positions, unless we put them across in memos to our CMDs, put them across in memos to the Minister of Health, you put them in articles and publish them in the newspapers, put them in collaborative journals and publish them in peer-reviewed journals. Unless you do that, the day that light overshadows darkness, you will not be one of the people who's known to be foresighted. So foresightedness, I think, is one of the most important things in our strategy. Again, since they put money in local vaccines manufacturing, and now they have crowded, they are trying to crowd pharmacy out of local vaccines manufacturing. Because I told a senior colleague that anybody who tries to separate vaccines R&D from pharma R&D is being disingenuous, because vaccines are a subset of pharmaceuticals. The same stages of clinical trials, the same route to market, the same expertise that applies to and all over the world, 9 out of 10 companies that do R&D and do manufacturing of vaccines are pharmaceutical companies. It's only in Nigeria and in Africa because Dr. Adigwe's muscles are not big enough. Well, since they've tried to crowd us out, our job is to do what? Find new and innovative areas so that in 5-10 years' time, when vaccines manufacturing is no longer fashionable and nanotechnology becomes fashionable, artificial intelligence becomes fashionable, API manufacturing and R&D becomes fashionable, contextual processing protocol becomes fashionable. In that 5 to 10 to 15 years, people will say, NIPRID, you people were foresighted. So these are some of the new areas that we're going into. Nanotechnology, we got a grant from the Japanese government, close to 6 billion. It's about 95% complete. It's going to be the first nanotechnology lab in Africa for drug development and phytomedicinal research. Active pharmaceutical ingredients. We wrote and secured a multi-billion naira partnership from NCC. When I went to see the executive vice chairman of NCC for partnership, people say, this small boy, does he know his work? Within Confefernce with communications, come to NIPRID and you will see it. They've given us that particular building, built and completed in 4 months. Generator, auditorium, lecture halls and everything. That is for my artificial intelligence and machine learning laboratory. When we finish, it will be the first dedicated AI and ML lab in Africa for drug development and phytomedicinal research. API manufacturing and concept training. Again, this is an area which we have been talking about for years in NIPRID. And because we had been the leaders in articulating the concept, immediately India banned the export of APIs, which for your own consumption, if that had continued for just a few more weeks, all you'll be doing in your hospitals is sitting down and counseling patients without any medication. That is how at risk we were as a nation. But because NIPRID has for years been making that argument, Afrexim Bank has just given us close to $1 million to put up that lab in NIPRID. Similar areas, phytomedicinal research, excipient development. I must say that, where is Managing Director Tuhemba? Is he still in the room? Yeah, if he has left, I just want to congratulate him and appreciate his body. For the first time in the history of NIPRID, the pharmaceutical manufacturer in this country stepped up to the plate and gave us a pledge of close to 100 million naira to develop products for them. We've gone very far with 4 products, and we've also had a proof of concept for pharmaceutical grade starch alongside several other offcuts that came from that product. And so just my final slide on foresightedness. Again, for years, we had postulated that a plant called Andrographis paniculata could have activity that will help boost the immune system. And immediately COVID came on. I was on the telly, I was in the newspapers, and I said, based on the profile of this product, profile that we have used our artificial intelligence competencies to deduce, there is a possibility that this product can be of use in COVID-19. They said, write a letter to this person. From there, they carried the file to this person. Come and make presentation. I must have made close to 15 presentations. In the middle of carrying file from one office to another and making presentations, what happened? Scientists in Thailand used the same plant in a less sophisticated formulation to begin to treat community transmission of COVID-19. So in a way, this is a knife that has cut 2 edges. We were foresighted in bringing that intervention to fore. But because of the lack of prioritization in our settings, this is where we are. And so the next 2 slides are a list of where I feel that, that administrative and hospital pharmacists can use this 3-pronged strategy to begin to reform their collective practice and their individual professional advancement in order to get ahead. I have listed them. in 2 slides, so I'm not going to read them verbatim. But when you get these slides, note that some of you are already doing. A few of you are not. But there's certain areas where you are already doing, but for which there is no empirical evidence that you are doing it. So you need to do what? You need to articulate the capacity, then do what? Advocate the intervention so that people will know that you and your organization were foresighted. Satellite pharmacies, again, I know many people know about this. A few of them have been listed here. I think the penultimate one, no, the one in the middle, which is production, drug information, and pharmacovigilance, is a nice one for people to take away. The next slide has similar interventions. One of the key things you need to take away is the need, the key urgent need for strategic collaboration and partnerships. Because if you have a problem and you come to NIPRID and say, design this operational research for us to solve this problem, and we do so, you will use the report to write to your CMD. Institutional reform will start. NIPRID will use your cohort and get it peer-reviewed, published, and then it gets out there in the outer world. Not once, not twice, not 3 times. Our seminar publications have led to key development partners picking up the phone to call us to say, we read your article. Let us sit down and talk about a project that builds on this research. We will fund. We did something in one of the journals on vaccines hesitancy. It was one of the first in the world. We did something on KAP for Ebola. It was the first in the world. And the recent one, which a lot of people have called us on, including from the EU, is the work we did on identifying the importance of patent waivers and intellectual property on vaccines and pharmaceutical manufacturing. It is out in PLOS now, and a lot of partners have called us, including the EU and Oxford University, for that research. So it is key that when you are advocating, in addition to your gray literature, get peer-reviewed output so that you can begin to talk about getting grants for further work. And the last one, which I would single out for mention, is, no, I will single out 3. So those people who are eyeing me that I have overshot my time, please, soyez patience. DRF issues. Hospital management view of pharmacy as a revenue department. Prevention, mitigation strategies, and coping mechanisms. Everybody in this room knows that this is an issue. How many of us have articulated it as a research question and published on it? If we have, how have we transmitted the output in terms of policy papers or in terms of reports to our CMDs? The other one I want to pick out is the penultimate one, which is maximizing pharmacists' potential, the role of private practice. Why is it that pharmacists arguably are more capacitated than medical doctors and have less professional to population ratio than medical doctors, yet doctors are allowed to do private practice and pharmacists are not? We all know that this is a problem. How have we articulated it as a research question and published it in world-class journals so that those doctors who are sitting on it in the presidency, because I know that Baba Shehu has done a good job on this in the bill, who are sitting on this in the presidency will read it and be ashamed. The last one, assessing policy and practice adherence to Executive Order number 3 in government establishments. Managing Director Tuhemba, in his presentation, showed you the slide that had Executive Order number 3. How many of us know about Executive Order number 3, Section 4F? Please put up your hand if you do. Executive Order number 3 speaks about prioritization in procurement of made in Nigeria products. In Section 4F, pharmaceuticals are listed there. So it is illegal for a government organization which is procuring pharmaceuticals not to prioritize made in Nigeria. I was in PMG Man when we managed, myself, my then chairman, Dr. Okeakba, used our access to ensure that when that executive order was being articulated, pharmaceuticals were mentioned specifically, because we knew that if there was fidelity to that particular clause, that single executive order will engineer local manufacturing like wildfire. But Managing Director Tuhemba came and put it on the board and was appealing to you people. If I was the executive secretary of PMG Man till now, I would commission research, highlight all those people who are not procuring made in Nigeria, and I will report them to the presidency. That's what I will do, because it is there, it's an executive order. Go to the oil industry where they have a similar order. Prior to that order in the oil industry, IOCs used to import drinking water because their what do you call it, expatriates cannot drink water that is made in Nigeria. But the NCDMB has held them on the neck. They give you sanctions, they give you fines. And now, based on that order in the oil industry, I have friends who have welding companies, metal companies, cable companies, and they're cashing out in millions of dollars because of that order. We, in the pharma sector, we're sitting down and waiting for people to use their good mind to follow an executive order. I say you people don't know Nigerians. These are other opportunities in the sector for particularly hospital pharmacists, which I think is an area where some have started and some are yet to join in. But like I said, the past 5 slides are listed. Those should be the key takeaways in terms of areas where you can use those 3 strategies. Articulate your competency. Use academic and gray literature means to advocate those competencies. And most importantly, always demonstrate your foresightedness. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, NIPRID has demonstrated that we are always there for collaboration and partnership to all Nigerians, and particularly well-meaning stakeholders who want to genuinely improve access to care for our people whilst at the same time stimulating socio-economic development. It will be a thing of honor if after this conference, we begin a functional partnership with AHAPN so that together we can leverage on our significant, albeit diverse strengths to improve the health and well-being of our people. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you for watching. For regular updates in health sector and pharma research and development, click on the subscribe button right now. Remember to like and share as well.